Welcome to Sound of the Gjallarhorn, where faith, tradition, and philosophy meet the modern world. Here is your host, Mark Greer.
Welcome to the show, everyone, and hail the gods and goddesses. I'm your host, Mark Greer, and here we are on another episode of Sound of the Gjallarhorn. We just got past the Yule season, got into the new year, starting 2018 fresh. I want to apologize to everybody. I know I haven't been as consistent with doing this show as I would like to, but I'm just trying to keep everything in order. We've got so many projects coming forward. We've got so many things that are happening, and for not just for the Nordic Society, but also for my family and stuff that I'm working on. So it's really exciting, but it's just it's a lot of work, takes a lot of time. So we're going to try to start being a little bit more consistent, getting these out at least once a month, and trying to do that, so we can get all this stuff out there. So today we're going to be discussing a new thing. We just put it on Facebook. We've been talking about it here lately. It's called the Sidian School of Thought. Now, the Sidian School is something, that we're trying to build and trying to grow. Something that's not really, it is kind of connected with the Nordic Society because it stems from our work, but it isn't the Nordic Society. The Sidian School is going to be something that if you agree with what we're doing, then you can say you're Sidian. You can say you're Sidian Asatru, Sidian Odinist. You can say that this is something you agree with and you connect to. You don't have to be a member of the Nordic Society. You don't have to connect to what we're doing. You just have to say that you agree with this philosophy with what we're putting out. And we're trying to make this something that's a little bit more holistic than stuff that's been previously done. So we're trying to look at all the different aspects, different ways that we can express this in a way so that we can exemplify these standards and exemplify these ideas that we're putting out. So the word Sidian itself, comes from foreign Sid or Sidr, which means the customs or the ways. So it's basically, customary, the customary way of living, the traditional way. And so we have, these different ideas that we're putting out, but it's going to be something for you to basically, give an identification for things that you believe in. So, because there's, let's face it, over the years, Asatru Odinism has become, it's a hodgepodge of a lot of different ideas, a lot of different beliefs, which is great, but sometimes people can feel lost in all that. Sometimes people need an order out of it. They need something to say. And our ancestors did the same thing. They would build cults around different gods and goddesses, and they would build schools of thought, and they would build philosophies, and it was very common. And so that's what we're doing. The school of thought is something that comes out of, basically out of the Greeks, and they were real big on that. And we're going to, our ancestors obviously would have had something, even though we don't really have many or any records of anything like that for the North. It still would have been something that they did, and their cults were something that's recorded, and we know. And with each cult would have came a school of thought, a philosophy around it. Obviously, you're not just going to say, I just worship this deity because I just like this deity. There's always going to be a thought process behind it. There's always going to be a way to believe around it. So with our school, we have. We first asked ourselves, why do we need a school of thought? Why do we feel like we need one? Well, obviously, like what we said, we want to have something, a name, a word, a concept to identify what we have to offer. The ideas, the laws, the rules, the ethics, the morals, the spirituality, the politics, everything. And to show people this is what we want to do. This is what we believe in, what we think is valuable to our community and to our faith, And we feel like this is a way for us to make our legacy, to make our mark, for people who are Sidian to say, hey, we have this belief system and we feel like it needs to be codified, and we feel like it needs to be something, not like a dogma that's thrown down people's throat, because we're not telling anybody how to live. We're just basically creating a very, very central core of beliefs that are, how we all agree upon that is something that matters to us, So it's not like saying there's only one way, there's only one belief, this is a dogma, and you got to believe this, and you got to think like this. It's not like that at all. It's just simply saying, here's a set of principles, here's a set of ideas, and if you agree with those, then you pretty much are part of this school of thought, You're connecting to it. So read over the materials, and if you like them and you agree with them, then, you're one of us. Simple as that. And so, we know that, the more chaotic everything is, then, there's got to be an order that rises out of that. And that's what we're trying to do, is trying to create some semblance of an ordering of our beliefs and our ideas. And So with that ordering, we look at, we want to try to have a more holistic approach to everything. We want to have a stronger worldview that sort of encompasses everything within our lives, so that we can tell people, this. When I tell someone that I'm Scythian, anyone who has an idea on what that is will know just pretty much everything that I believe in, and that's what it is for me. I get so tired of all these labels and all these different categories and all this stuff, and it's like, I believe this, but I also believe this, and I believe this, and like, these are my politics, and this is my religion, this is my ethics, this is my morals. I mean, and it's all labeled and labeled and labeled, and it's like, I like to just be simple about it and have a simple, direct viewpoint that says, hey, this is what I believe, this is what I think, and doesn't have to have all that chaos and all these different viewpoints and get all complex for no reason, right? So with that, we look at the three categories that we have to make this a holistic belief system, and that would basically be the three categories of existence, which would be mental, spiritual, and physical, right? Some people add emotional to, but we'll just stick with these. And so the mental is the philosophy and ethics of it, right? How we think, how we reason, how we believe we should act towards other people. The spiritual aspect of it is our faith and our connection to things that we feel are greater than ourselves, to our folk, to our family, to other things around us, right? And then the physical is our identity, our heritage, our politics, the physical world that connects us to us, right? So with that, we have for this school, we have 9 standards of our school. And number 1 is we do not teach that this is the way for all, only that is the way for us. We only teach that this belief belongs to us. It's not something that we're trying to proselytize. We're not trying to spread to the world. We're just saying, if you agree with this, then you're a part of us, and that's cool. And we're all in this together, right? But it's not something we're trying to force people to believe in. All right, our school, number 2, our school encompasses our entire identity. We are it, and it is us. Okay, this means it's just a holistic viewpoint that represents all of who we are. And we're going to utilize different methods so that we can, debate and discuss and grow the school, and we can talk about it, because this isn't, the Mark Pereira show. I'm not here to tell people how to live and all this stuff. I'm just throwing the ideas and research that I put out there, and if people like it, that's great. But if people want to build upon this and grow upon it, I'm all open to that. I've always been open to that. Okay, number 3, we reject all forms of universalism, for there is no unity, only multiplicity. Now we're going to go into that a little bit more. But basically, I've had shows on this before where unification, we've just come to the realization that this is the great evil of the world. That every time people try to tell us to unify, they pretty much either want to dominate us or kill us. Okay? All right, the hierology, number 4, the hierology is our way of life. Now, the hierology is basically our lore, our stories, our sagas. And this is something that we kind of build upon, and we build our philosophies upon, and we build our ethics on, and we build our politics on, and we build all of these things on. So we see it as a hierology. Number 5, we protect our sacred wisdom and lore by learning it and teaching it. So, obviously as a school of thought, we're going to be teaching people things. We're going to be developing classes. We're going to be developing ways for people to learn more about the school and for people to be connected to it and gain that knowledge and understanding of our, mental, physical, and spiritual aspects. All right. Number 6, ours is not the way of one, is the way of many. All right. Now this is an important one. Okay, because like I said, we're taught on so many different levels, and this is why I believe that the unifiers have been as successful as they have been, is because they have come to us with a holistic approach. When one of these guys believes in something, they believe in something from the top to the bottom, right? And even though they get a little crazy, they get actually not a lot crazy with it. It's something that they can approach towards people in every aspect, right? So like they have teachers in schools and who teach every single subject and can present that different subject in a unifying principle, right? You get some schools that are like leftist schools who say, they're going to present every single subject and they're going to present a leftist viewpoint on that. And you have some that are Christian schools that can do the same thing, or religious schools and all this stuff, because they have a holistic viewpoint and have a holistic idea on how they're going to express that belief system. And that becomes a part of who they are. So that's what gets taught, right? And, and obviously when they're doing it because they're out to proselytize and control and dominate, they're doing it in a way that is meant to manipulate and control people, but we're simply saying that we want to have this holistic viewpoint, right? That because as we'll show later, that's just not how polytheism works, and so that's not the way we're going to do this. Okay. So number 7, our tasks are simple. The neophyte shall learn, the acolyte shall practice, and the hierophant shall teach. We're not going to have huge hierarchies and big complex structures. That's going to be it. You know, the neophytes are going to be the new guys who are coming to learn, who want to know more about our faith, want to know about our beliefs, and we're going to be there and have people that teach them, right? Then the acolyte should be the one who's like, you know, got some knowledge, gained a certain position, gained a certain level of knowledge and understanding of the way of the school, and then, you know, they can start to practice it and live it in their life. And then once they've lived it for so long and they've started to really become, you know, personable with it, connected to it really well, then they can become a hierophant. And a hierophant is the highest one where they can teach people, and they become the teachers and instructors. Okay. Now number 8. Now this is going to be the big one, right? This is going to be the big one where a lot of people are going to be like, what? But this is really important. It's our goal is to break the world to pieces. Now this is the number one message that we're going to be trying to tell people. Everything that we're doing, everything that we're teaching people is about multiplicity, right? It's the cornerstone of everything that we're doing, because multiplicity is everything to a polytheist. We believe that the universe is made of multiples. We believe that the world is made of multiples. We know it is. I mean, it's right there in front of your face. You know, you can see it. The whole idea of everything being one is like this abstract vision that people have in their heads. When you look at things, you can obviously see all the multiples around you, and you can't see a unification of anything. It's all just there. The many billions of stars and the atoms and the particles and the animals and the trees, it's all multiples, and there is no one. There is no unity in all. You know, there are connections and there are relationships, but there's no unity. There's no singularity. Singularity is ridiculous. It's a joke. You know, people say, well, no, we're talking about relations. No, you're not. When you say one, you mean one, right? When you say we're going to be one, we're going to be one. The reason why the philosophies and the politics and the spiritual systems that have tried to make things one have failed so miserably is because it doesn't exist in nature. And if it doesn't exist in nature, it can't exist. You can't force it to exist, right? So that's why we're here to break the world to pieces. We're here to tell everybody one is a bad thing. Many is a good thing. You know, think of the politics. Think about every time, you know, when we have a structure where there's like a political structure where there's many people voting on something rather than just one person voting on something, it always ends up better for everybody, right? I'm sure there's people out there who may disagree with that, but I don't care. I mean, that's the truth, you know. And so we see monarchs and emperors and dictators and all this stuff who just kill people and bring just the worst kind of poverty and death and destruction and mayhem, and it just doesn't work. Because it's against nature. It's not multiples. It's, you know, it's based on a monotheistic structure that's like just one land, one God, one king, all that stuff, right? It doesn't work. It's failed. It continues to fail. It's always failed. It's never not failed. And so, like, what point do we as a human species step back and be like, hey, you know, this idea of oneness, it just doesn't work. We have to give up on it. We have to stop, you know. And so the last one, number 9, is we teach others to become as one. No, I'm sorry. Excuse me. We do not teach others to become as one. We teach them to become themselves. A little bit of slip there. But yeah, so we don't teach people that we're all here to unify and become as one species, as one planet and one universe and all that stuff. We teach people to be yourself, you know, be who you are, be a representative of your community, be a representative of your family, of the things that connect to you, you know. And we're going to get into that as well later about sovereignty and freedom and stuff like that. So these are the 9 standards that we have as a school, and we're going to, you know, continue talking about these. And because it's something that is going to allow us to have sort of this springboard for all of our research, all of our work, all of our ideas, and all the things that we're trying to put together so that people can identify with them and label them and say, hey, I agree with that. That's something I connect to, and I think that this is the way that we should go. I think that we should start looking at schools of thought so that we can start to have a voice in the conversations, because for far too long we haven't had one. And you know, that may be some of our fault, that may be some of those who oppose us, their fault, but it doesn't matter. The fact is we have to do everything that we can to get a voice at the table so that we can start showing people, you know, the best way to start heading in the right directions for us and for our folk. So we'll start with, we're going to go into each one of the 3 categories we discussed before. we'll go into the mental starting out, right? So the under the mental category, we have the philosophy, right? Now, philosophy is, there are unifying philosophies. Some of Plato's philosophy had that, but Plato was kind of all over the place, so he had different philosophies, but some people have cited Plato for the most as being like the first unifying philosopher, and and there were others as well, and later on, but the main idea was that there's this this sort of demiurge, or this great consciousness that exists throughout all of the universe, and all of it connects everything, and everything is all one based on this one singular consciousness, and everything is singularity, and it's all great, and it's all connected, and it's all one, right? And this philosophy just it doesn't ring true with nature. And if you ever study like creationist theory and like how those guys look at stuff, I mean, they have to constantly compound one absurdity after another in order to make this seem reasonable. Because the more science looks at the universe and see all these multiple forces, just the multiplicities just continue to grow and grow, and there's so many of them, and they exist in such a far and wide-reaching space, right? That the whole idea that it's all somehow under one blanket, under one umbrella, becomes more and more absurd. And it's like this doesn't work. It's not based on reality. It's based on fantasy, right? That everything's not connected. I know it sounds beautiful, and that's the one thing that unifiers have always really loved, is the beautiful language of it, because it sounds so wonderful. We're all just going to live under one roof and one banner, and it's going to be so great, and we'll all be happy and all this stuff. But the problem is that, they use those pretty colorful, flowery words, but every time they present it to people, they end up just slaughtering a bunch of people. And that's what's always happened. And they get mad, they get frustrated, they can't make it work, they've never been able to make it work. So they just start killing all their enemies to try to see if they can possibly use that to make it work, right? And it never has, and it's never going to, And I've listed on some Facebook groups and stuff some of the unifying principles, and they'd be like Christianity, Islam, Judaism, communism, fascism, all of the ideas out there that try to unify people under a single banner, And some people didn't like what I said. I don't care. I'm sorry. You don't like what I'm saying, then don't follow me and don't, listen to what I got to say. It's that simple. Because my belief is, if you tie yourself to a banner, okay, that's fine. And I'm not knocking your banner or what you believe or anything like that. What I'm saying is, if you believe that the whole world should be under that banner, then you're a unifier. And that's what you are. And unification is against everything that polytheists have ever believed in, that they've ever stood for. And so you'd probably be better off in a monotheist structure, or belief system. Or maybe not. I mean, some people believe what they believe. I'm not out here to force you what to believe or think. But I'm just telling you to be philosophically consistent. If you're going to be a polytheist, then multiples is where it's at. It's pretty much the primary way of interpreting this. There are others. There are the religions that say that the many gods are, manifestations of the one and all that stuff. But, I am a pure polytheist, and I believe in multiples. I believe in multiples in the universe because I've never seen anything that shows me to the contrary. And I don't think anybody's ever seen anything that shows them to the contrary. They can find connections, they can find relationships, they can find things that kind of, maybe look like it and all that stuff, but they've never found any discernible proof that shows, hey, yeah, that we know everything is perfectly one. It's all perfectly connected. I mean, now like, with quantum physics and quantum mechanics and stuff like that, I mean, now they're starting to say there's not even a universe, that there's multiverses, and everything's, multiples of that. So it's not even there as a singularity with what we look at the sky, when we look in the telescopes and stuff like that. It's always going to be multiples. And I've said before to people that even when you look in the mirror and you're looking at the human being in front of you and you give it a name, I look at the mirror and I see myself, and I identify myself as Mark, and that's who I am because that's the name I was given. Even that person that I look at in the mirror is made up of millions of little cells and particles and atoms and all that stuff. And so I'm not even a singularity. You're not even a singularity. Nothing is a singularity. It doesn't exist, So and with that, I mean, one of the things that we start to do, is we question a lot of the things that are out there about the whole idea of unification. And we look at evidence, but we also look at logic and reason. We don't stick ourselves, within the category of empiricism, because empiricism is focused mainly on the principle that we only follow evidence, right? And a lot of people are like, oh, no, you only follow evidence. You have to only follow. Well, that's not true, because you also have to follow logic and reason. And, logic and reason sometimes may fly in the face of some of the evidence. And that's happened before in many situations, many times. And I would, like, as far as the heathen community, I would kind of show that as a separation from the Reconstructionists who are out there. And I like a lot of those guys are my friends, and they're good people, and I'm definitely not knocking them, because they've done a lot of great work. But, Reconstructionism is based solely on the evidence. It's on what we have and what we see and what we can, use based on solely on the evidence. And that's an empirical belief system, which is fine. A lot of science is, but there's also, scientific beliefs that are based on logic and reason as well, that sometimes we have to fill in the blanks, sometimes we have to say 2 + 2 = 4. I mean, it's just the way it is, and we have to base the logic of the reasoning that we see and we're looking at and we're experiencing ourselves, and we know that this is just the way it is. Like, we know that love exists, we know that it's something that connects people together, and it's not just a biological relationship or based on pheromones and all that stuff. And I mean, it's something a little bit greater than that, appreciation for art, appreciation for morality and honor. I mean, these aren't things that you can just quantify with science. These are things that, we have to reason out and say, hey, this is stuff that we experience. We don't just see, right? So, we follow the 9 points of Odinic philosophy is one of the things, we've put together. And I can put a link up to that when we put this out there. But those 9 points are something that we believe in and we follow, and it's basically along the same lines that the gods are multiples, that they're part of families, and trying to look at the world in a scientific view, but also from a reasonable view and a logical view. So and another big aspect that we have is embracing the tangible over the abstract. Like we said, the idea that we're all one is an abstract concept. The idea that we're multiples is a tangible aspect. We see our gods and goddesses, we look at them as representations. They have images, they have personalities, they have ways to look at them. You look at Odin, and he has one eye, and he has a long gray beard, and Thor with his hammer and his red beard, and he's strong, and the beautiful goddesses and stuff like that, and they have images and imagery, and you're not allowed to have that in monotheistic religions, because their religions are abstract. And so they're abstract belief systems, and you're not allowed to contemplate those belief systems. You're just supposed to believe in them. And so we are just the opposite. We believe in the tangible. We believe in what we can see, touch, hear, and feel, but we also believe in what we can reason out. So we don't allow other people to tell us how to live our lives. We don't allow great masters and dictators and priests and all that stuff to tell us who we are and how we think and what we're supposed to believe. It's just not us. It's not. That's not. I don't think that's not any heathen that I know, or any Asatru or Odinist that I know, because that's just not the way that we are. All right. So the next category that we're looking at is the spiritual aspect, right? So in spirituality, we recognize that polytheism is an expression of nature, that it is about the natural world around us. We don't put our deities in some far off land that's magical and wonderful and isn't connected to the natural world. I mean, you try to sit down with a monotheist and ask them about their God and where that God exists, and they're always in heaven. And, well, what's heaven? Well, heaven's this place outside of time and space. And well, it's like, well, time and space is like reality. So if they're outside of time and space, they're outside of reality. It means they're not real. Because where is this place? Where do you locate it? Where do you look? Oh, you're not supposed to think all that stuff. You're just supposed to believe in it. Right? It's the magical fairyland of belief. It's the land of make-believe is what it is. So, in the land of make-believe, their God exists, and he has his pearly gates, and they open it up, and, and everything's wonderful and beautiful and perfect, and it's not a part of nature. It's not a part of the real world. It's not a part of existence. It's just what they say it is, because they can't wrap their mind around a natural being that's immortal and that can connect to us through blood and family and heritage and stuff like that. So they just see this eternal being as the end all of everything. So when you look at like the creationist philosophy, they try to make it out like because he's outside of time and space, that's the only way that he can be eternal. But his powers do not reach to humanity because we have free will, but he's all powerful. It just gets confusing. It gets crazy. So we don't look at any of that stuff. We don't contemplate all that. It's all ridiculous nonsense to us. And so we look at our religion and our faith, our beliefs as an expression of nature. And if it's expressed in nature, then it's natural and it's real and it exists, right? So the thing about it is, though, and for me, the reason why I feel that polytheism is the best way of looking at the universe is because I looked at it, I reasoned it out, I researched it, I tried to find like what was the best way to believe, what was the best way to think. I mean, how am I going to look at the universe and how do I contemplate these things? I didn't just wake up and have somebody beat it into my head like most other people. I had a Christian upbringing and stuff like that, but I didn't feel like that was the way for me, and I made my own choice. And when you start to do that, I mean, polytheism is a reasonable choice because it makes sense. Not because you're told it's made sense or you're supposed to make sense of it, but because it actually makes sense, and that's the difference. Because polytheism has always been about understanding the world around you, whereas monotheism has always been about controlling the world around you. I mean, you look at like in their holy texts and stuff like that, everything is about controlling and dominating, controlling women, controlling children, controlling animals, controlling nature. We are the whole world is our domain and we just take over and do whatever we want to, And like after the Christians took over, I mean, you saw just whole animal populations wiped out and forests just swashed away and, people were killed and murdered and I mean, it was just dominate, control, kill. I mean, we still see that with monotheist cults all over the world. It still happens. It's still going to happen. It's never going to stop. A lot of the reason why people get upset about like the Islamic immigration issues and stuff like that is because they're upset because they're losing their grip on the Western world. And we're upset because the Western world is our heritage. And they don't care about our heritage. The Christians and the monotheists, they never cared about our heritage. They cared about controlling the West, about the power that they achieved by taking it over with force and using the Roman Empire in order to establish their great, religious Reich or, kingdom or whatever, right? So it was like that was their power. That's their power center, their power structure. Whereas for us, this is like these are our homelands. This is the land of our people, of our blood, of our heritage. And that's why it matters to us and why we don't like that, Not because we want to hurt other people, we want to oppress them or dominate them, but because we don't want them to dominate us, because we've been through this before. We've seen it happen, and we know it's not going to end well, So we know that the spiritual understanding should be like an expression of science. It should be an expression of trying to understand the world, always doing like Odin does and always be on the journey, be seeking knowledge, seeking wisdom, trying to connect to those things that relate to you in a spiritual way, but also in a knowledgeable way, so that you're being reasonable and you're being understanding and you're being intelligent in the way that you look at the world around you. All right. So everything, once again, everything goes back to multiples. It's all back to multiples. When we embrace this holistically, when we embrace the idea of multiplicity holistically, then we truly become one with the ways of our ancestors. We truly become polytheists. Polytheism should be within every thought that we have, within every notion that we put out there, and every idea that we bring forth. Because when we do that, when we express that and show the multiples, I mean, think about it for a second, all right? So you have this idea of one, right? One. And when people try to say, well, it's all one, we're all unity, it's all unity, and we're connected, and blah, 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 and it's not that. Or one means I control, we have one path, one way, one way to believe, one way to think, one leader who tells you what to think, one nation that tells you that, that leader is the one who tells you what to think, one God that tells that leader what to think. It's all one. It's dictatorship. It is control. It is domination. But when you have many, right? Then you get to make a choice just by the name of it. Poly means many, means it's basically diversity. It's like we said, diversity should be our word because we believe in the philosophy of many different ways to believe. When you have the doctrine, the idea of one way to believe, then you can only, by the definition of the term, have oppression and tyranny and death. Because that's what it always results to, right? So when you have the philosophy of many, then I, as a person who believes in many, I can say, well, hey, I believe like this, and you believe like that. Good for you, because I'm a polytheist. I'm a Sidian. I believe that polytheism flows through my every thought process, and that means that you can believe how you want to, and I can believe how I want to, and that's fine. Just don't mess with me and mine, right? And so with that, when we're talking about messing with me and mine, we have the physical, right? So the physical, goes back to what we were talking about in our 9 standards, is that we are here to break the world to pieces. And when we're talking about that, right, we have to look at, the ideas, the foundations of law and sovereignty, okay? Now, when you're looking at law, and I'm sure probably anyone out there who's studied politics and law and legal systems and stuff like that, we know that there's sort of this scale between, legality and anarchy, right? And it's kind of a balance, right? You can go all the way, one way where you have just total anarchy, there's no laws, absolute freedom, and then you go all the way the other way where you have complete tyranny and complete law and complete control. And we know that we want to try to stay balanced sort of towards the anarchy side, so that we can have freedom, right? We know that we have to have laws. We know that we have to sacrifice some of our freedoms in order to have security and safety, but not too much, right? We know that we don't want to give people the freedom to just run around and kill as many people as they want to, or molest children, or do, really horrible, heinous acts that people want to commit, right? So we know that those things have to be stopped. They have to be banned. You can't do that. You can't be going around doing these things that some people want to do, all right? Well, the same thing goes for sovereignty. Now, sovereignty is like, I am an individual. If I have complete sovereignty, then I'm basically just a pure, ardent individualist, and I can do whatever I want because I'm completely sovereign and I'm beholden to no one and nothing, right? And then you have all the way, to the other end of the spectrum where we have complete collectivism, which is an internationalist, globalist, statist collectivism, which is tyrannical, just like all the way on the other side of the law spectrum, right? Because when you have that, state national controlled collectivism, then you no longer an individual and you're just basically controlled by a state entity. Now, what happened was, for a long, long time, our ancestors knew that they had to give up some of their freedoms in order to have law and order, and they also had to give up some of their sovereignty in order to have a peaceful civilization around them. But that sovereignty was limited to their tribe and their clan and their family, right? So this allowed them to exist and live in a free, territory. And that territory was theirs. It belonged to them. And they had a say-so in the government that was around them. They had a say-so in what was being done and the laws that were being made, because they could go up and say, hey, I don't like this law. And if you don't do something about this, or we don't change this, or we don't stop it, then there's going to be a problem. And then politicians would be like, hey, well, I don't want to get my face smashed in or something like that, or I know that, these guys can easily sway this or sway that, I know that they have control, right? And that's it. That's what it is. That's what the elimination of sovereignty is about. When they created the state, the nation state, right? And this is why I kind of lean away from nationalism as well. Because the nation state is the idea of eliminating your sovereignty for the sovereignty of the state, of the nation, right? You lose your identity for that of the nation. And so it's okay. You have to sacrifice some of your sovereignty in order to build something. But when you do it in a way that you're giving your sovereignty away to people who you will never meet, never see, and never know, then those people can have a power over you and a control over you unlike any ever known before, right? Before the monotheists came around with their kingdoms, with their divine right of kings, with their, having these elitist powers over you that you would never meet. You wouldn't even be able to talk to them. You wouldn't even be able to go to them with a grievance and say, I have a problem with this. You can't do it because you don't get to see them. They live in their big mountain castles and they're locked away and they have soldiers and they have power and structures and you can't get around that, So that's what we're talking about. And I know some people will probably call this a form of tribalism or whatever. And I don't really like tribalism because it evokes the idea that we're all wanting to put bones in our noses and go run around in the woods and stuff like that. And that's not it. I mean, for anything, it would probably be a form of communalism or localism, right? Where it's a political structure that just focused on, the tribe, the family, the clan, the community around you, whatever you want to call it. But it would be something, obviously, that would have to be a modernist perspective, not an ancient, we're not going back to the 10th century or anything like that. But we want to be able to empower the local and disempower the national. We want to take power away from those centralized, central planning governments that have just rise up and fail, rise up and fail, rise up and fail, rise up and fail. And they have been doing so ever since their incarnation. Whereas these structures that were local existed for tens of thousands of years. Like their existence goes back as far into the history books as we can imagine. And there was never any problems. We never saw any huge collapse, any problems. And see, that's one of the biggest problems with the unification that we see today, because we have become so connected, so intertwined, that if we see any kind of downfall happen in the near future, and a lot of people are saying that that's coming, and it looks like, things get more and more volatile. If it collapses, we all collapse. The whole world collapses. We could all just all become a third world country overnight, and we all know it. We all just know that at any moment that could happen. But if you have local power, localized power, where it's around you, and you can build federations and have trade with others and those around you, but you're still about you and your community, and your power structure is built within the local community, then it's going to be a lot harder to take that power from you. And that's why the original monarchs, when they were doing this stuff, and they wanted to eliminate those tribal powers and those localized powers, did so with bloodshed, because they knew how much power they could gain. You look around in your area, and you look around in your kingdom or your land or whatever you claim you're going to be taken apart, and you see all these tribal kings and tribal chieftains, and you see how much power they have, right, in their communities and stuff like that. You know that the best way to get power yourself is to take it from them. So you take away their gods, you take away their multiplicities, and you create unities. You create unification principles that says we are all going to be one now. We're one. But it's not we're one, it's I am one. I am the king, I am the ruler, now I have ultimate power. That's what it's always been about, always going to be about. And so when we look at these communities and how we build communities, I mean, and I've talked to people who live in really tight-knit communities and had discussions with people about that, and they say one of the biggest problems that we have in our modern world is the loss of relationships with others, right? We claim to all be one, but we don't know anybody. I don't know my neighbors. I don't talk to them. They don't talk to me. People stay in their houses and they play on computers and they look at their phones and they don't communicate with each other, even though we're all supposed to be one. It's funny how everything that unifiers do, everything they say they're going to do, always ends up being the opposite, right? But nobody talks to each other anymore. Nobody has a connection to each other. We have this plague of lonely men and lonely women who can't connect to each other, can't form relationships, and can't build families. We have handicapped people and mentally ill people who are homeless and living on the streets because no one takes care of them, because they have no tribe and no community to go to. We have the elderly who are just thrown in state institutions, who can't survive, who can't do anything, but live off the state and hope that they don't get abused or attacked because they don't know the strangers that are taking care of them. We're lost in a national and an international landscape. And this landscape is taking away our identity. It's taking away everything because we don't have control over it. And we haven't had control over it for a long time. And all of the complaints and all of the problems that people have, all of the issues that people have talked about with the Western identities and all of these things have come from this loss of identity, this surrender of our sovereignty, of our localities. And that's what it's come from. So we have a philosophy, and that philosophy must be holistic in its approach. If you separate your beliefs into different categories, you subject yourself to conflicting attitudes and philosophical inconsistencies. Be true, be strong, and most of all, be sure of yourself. Know that you can stand up, that this can be something we can do. We could start a revolution with this. We could start a revolution in thought and idea where we tell people no more. We're not going to continue to surrender our freedoms and our sovereignties to these entities, to these strangers that we don't even know and will never know and never meet, who become more and more elitist every single year because we have no connection to them and we have no way to control them, and we haven't ever had a way to control them. So they just laugh at us no matter what we do. We can build all the constitutions, we can build all the republics, we can build all of these things we want to, but the one thing that we cannot build is a structure that will give us power if we can never be around those who control us, if we can never talk to them, if we can never see them, if they're just faceless entities who are on television or whatever, right? So if we have a holistic approach, we can branch into universities, into politics, into religions, into all kinds of arenas. And then we tell people, this is what we believe and this is what we think. All right, so that is our show for this evening. I want to appreciate everybody coming out and listening to us. If you're interested in what we're talking about here, you can look up the Sidian School on Facebook. You can send me a message. You can contact me, mark.norn@gmail.com or nornsociety@gmail.com. That's NORROENA society@gmail.com. You can look up our website, norna.org. We have all kinds of stuff out there. Look us up, contact us, be in touch. If you're interested in what we're talking about, we want to get this information out there. We want to get people, understanding about it and inspired by it, and because it's something we're really passionate about, and we believe that this is how we can set the world right, that we can make our mark by telling people this is what we have to do. I mean, because everything else is not working. Everything else just keeps this cycle going, So I appreciate everybody listening. Hail the gods and goddesses, and have a good night.
My father's estate, walled with brick and stone, with innumerable